So today I'm going to teach you how to do skin. Now this has been requested a couple times. I've chosen a couple models with a lot of skin showing, and we're gonna run with it. I'm gonna start with this He-Man looking dude. He looks like He-Man from Masters of the Universe from when we were kids. As such, I'm gonna paint him up like that. He's gonna be pale. He's gonna have blonde hair. This guy, I've decided to go with an African American skin tone, so he'll be darker, and I know that's something a lot of you are actually looking forward to. And this young lady I'm going to make pretty tan. The first step in all of these is a base coat. For the light skin, I start with desert sand. You can see that color. There's comparable colors in all of the expensive paints and in Citadel, P3, Army Painter, and Vallejo. But since this mostly gets covered up, I'm going to use this specific paint for it, and it's real simple. You don't even need to bother blocking out. You're going to take it, and anywhere you see skin, you just want to make sure you get everything covered. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. As I've said before, you don't need to worry at the beginning about being neat, because you're going to go back over most of this anyway to get your details in. So I'm literally just blocking this out. Now, there's several different methods to do a complete paint job on a miniature, and a lot of people will say block out all your colors, then do your washes, then your dry brushes. What I recommend, especially for beginners, and this is my beginner level course, is that you start with the lowest surfaces on the model. And by lowest, I mean the things that are deepest in there. Because as you paint, you're going to end up dry brushing a lot, and if you block it all out and you're not experienced, you can end up getting a dry brush on higher surfaces. So on most of these models, the lowest surface is going to be the skin. By lowest, I mean the thing that's deepest in there, the thing that when you dry brush will have other things that you can accidentally dry brush over. So that's why I start with the skin, especially with beginner level models. As you can see, I just block that out. We'll zoom in a little bit so you can see. Just painted all the skin in that desert sand. We're going to wait for that to dry, and while we do, I'm going to go ahead and work with the other two colors. For the tan individual, we're going to start with territorial beige. You're going to start, when you watch these tutorials, you're going to start to recognize all my colors. But that's the territorial beige there. Once again, all the major paint lines have comparable colors. And when it comes down to doing skin, you don't need to use much, because a little bit will go a long way. Now on her, I think she's got a little thigh showing. And that's the beautiful thing. Depending on how it's sculpted, in a lot of cases, you get to decide what is what. In this case, I'm gonna paint that thigh that's showing, and we're just going to pretend that it was skin to begin with. On her, she's got her face, her chest, her arms, and her neck. So I'm gonna block those out. Nice and simple. She's wearing gloves, so you don't need to worry about the hands. And just make sure that everything that you get everything that you want to be skin tone covered. And you don't need to worry at this point in time about getting it on anything else. I've got it on her apron, I've got it on her hair, got it a little bit of everywhere. But as you go back and paint everything else, fill everything else out, you're going to cover this stuff up anyway. And these paints are actually thin enough that you don't need to worry about it. Also, unless it looks really bad, like He-Man's shoulder here, at this stage you don't really need to worry about a contiguous, smooth, uniform coat, because we're going to end up doing a wash over it and then a dry brush. So a lot of this is going to get covered up again anyway. But I'm going to do this just because I saw a little bit of black showing through on his shoulder, and I didn't think that was going to work. honestly. And I missed a little spot there. We're gonna let those dry. And for our dark-skinned individual, I'm gonna start with a chocolate brown. There's a lot of different colors. Basically, once again, every one of the major companies has a color comparable. In the cheap paints, it's either chocolate bar or chocolate brown. I personally go with the Craft Smart, which I get at Walmart. It's literally called chocolate brown because I know what the color is going to come out like, and I use this a lot. I use that for washes on wood, dirt. I mean, it's pretty much a color I use on almost every model, especially models that are holding wooden items and weapons. And just like the others, sorry about that, I'm going to take, and yes, I'm covering up this guy's eyes because I want to show you how this effect looks on dark skin. And you're going to take it and you're going to cover everything, block it out, and once again, at this point in time, you don't need to worry about about getting it on other things. You just want to make sure that everything that is going to be skin gets covered, because otherwise you're going to be coming back and doing this over and over, and you're going to feel a little dumb because you're going to waste time. And don't feel bad if you miss a spot now, because we all do, and eventually you're going to find you're going to recognize everything. But sometimes you just get in there and you don't realize what a specific part of the model is supposed to be until you've already applied paint. So you got to go back, but don't worry about that for now. So as you can see, I've blocked out, zoom in a little bit. I've blocked out his face, his arms, his back, and his legs. And I'm gonna get a little more on his face because I did that light tone earlier when I was doing my eye tutorial. And then I'm gonna let these dry and we'll be back. Sorry about that. I'll let these dry and we'll be back here in just a couple minutes. Okay, the figures have dried. As you can see, we've got a nice creamy pale guy there. We've got a good chocolate brown starting there, and the beginnings of a good tan. Now, as with my stone tutorial, all of these need to have a wash. And I do this for everything. I mean, honestly, all of my minis. Everything is a base coat, a wash, and then a dry brush. That's how you get your depth. Now, normally on a pale individual, I would use Citadel's Reikland Flesh Shade. You can mix up your own. I do a lot of that, but these days, because I've got so much to paint, especially since I'm still working on Bones 2 and I've got Bones 3 plus some D&D minis, I'm using the pre-made washes. But since I've decided I'm going to go blonde with this guy, I'm going to go ahead and go with a shade that's got a little more of a yellowish tinge to it. So I've chosen Citadel's Seraphim Sepia shade, and literally you just brush these on, and you want a little bit goes a long way, but you want to put enough in there to actually get down into the crevices and cracks to give it some depth. But literally you just take your shade and brush it on. Now right now it doesn't look like much, but it'll sink into those crevices and give him some definition, especially once we add our dry brush to it. Now, your decision of shade or wash, the color you go with depends on what you want to portray. This guy I want to be kind of clean, so I'm going with a lighter color, and the golden tint of the Seraphim Sepia will work really well with the blonde hair. So that's literally, take a look there, That looks really good. And starting next week, I'll have better lights to do this stuff with, so I'll be able to get it closer to the camera for you to see. That's his skin tone. For our young lady, and this is the blacksmith, I'm going to go with an Agrax Earthshade to complement that dark brine, the darker flesh tone, the Territorial Beige, and do the exact same thing. Start on her face, brush it on, and just make sure that I get full coverage and get it down into the deeper parts of the model. Like on the back here, there's a section where her arm is up against her body, and the Agrax Earthshade settling in there, thicker than everywhere else, will actually help give you a shadow, which helps define the character. And then hit her leg, the one that we talked about earlier, and set her aside to dry. Now I've got a little bit extra there accidentally. This is a good chance for me to demonstrate a technique that I've talked about in my previous videos. Since I've got too much there, I literally just dry off my brush, and when I touch that, the brush will, and I have cat hair. I have cat hair everywhere. You touch that drop, and the brush will literally suck it off your model. I'm going to set that one aside to dry. And for this last gentleman, the one with the much darker skin, I'm going to use Nuln Oil. Nuln Oil is black, but it has a brown undertone, so it looks kind of dirty. And in this case, for the highlights on his face, that's actually exactly what we want. Just brush that on just like everyone else. Make sure that everything is covered. And you're good to go, and then we go back into the drying stage. And that honestly is the biggest part of painting miniatures, drying. Now you can see that tan that I used before is peeking through a little bit. That's not going to matter much because we are going to do a couple dry brushes over it. You let those dry, and then we'll come back here in a couple minutes and do the dry brushes. I'm going to add another layer of Seraphim Sepia to He-Man here, just because I think he needs it. And honestly, this technique is really good for table-ready minis and good for getting everything that you want to, especially if you're painting large armies. This is a statement to those people who play a game that I'm not going to mention because, well, it's insanely popular and I don't play it. But if you're doing large groups of minis, this technique can go really fast. When I come back here in a couple minutes, I will show you how to finish those out and how to give them a realistic looking skin. And we'll be back. Okay, everything's dried, and that's a very important step in the process. Once you apply your wash, you need to be very sure it's dry before you do any dry brushing, because otherwise you're going to end up with, well, honestly, you'll end up with smears and it'll look muddy, etc. Now I'm going to do the first two, the couple that are lighter, before I move on to the individual that's darker. And I apologize, I've been getting sick. We're going to do a dry brush on them, and that's what I showed you how to do in my stone tutorials. And I'll be honest, in the professional painting and the competition painting world, dry brush has taken on almost the status of a dirty word, and I don't understand why. If done right, it can create some amazing effects. And since this is the beginning and the beginner's tutorials, that's what I'm going to teach you, because it makes for some sharp looking models that are very easy to do. Now, with our light skin guy, Our goal is to dry brush back up to our original color. In this case, I'm going to do a couple different layers. I'm going to start with the territorial beige, and I'm going to put a little bit in one of the paint cups, and then the desert sand that we started with, put a little bit there, and you're actually going to mix them in a third cup to get an in-between color. And to do that, you dip your brush, wipe it off on the bottom, dip your brush, and mix it. And the main reason we're doing this is because we want the first layer of dry brush to be darker than our final. You're going to wipe it off, wipe it out just like I demonstrated in the stone tutorial, and then literally take it at an angle, and you want to dry brush all the high spots. And that does mean getting your brush into some of these areas, around back especially. But this is going to bring out his muscles and make his skin pop. Now I went with a little bit of a wetter dry brush than I normally would, because this first layer, since I have that thick seraphim sepia, I kind of want to hide the tone that it does on most of his skin, while keeping the low lights or the low portions of his skin emphasized there. Now I decided to go with a yellowish tinge to it, not because I wanted to look jaundiced, but because it will look good with his blonde hair. And that's a lot of what makes a figure look good, is your color choice. And as you can see, his skin is starting to pop there. But that's just the first layer. Now, on a well-muscled figure, you want to make sure that you concentrate on the abs, pecs, and shoulders, because that's where a lot of paint variation can get. But as you can see there, zoom in a little bit. As you can see there, we're getting a very, and please pardon the yellowness of my camera. I'm using true color lights, and my camera does not really want to cooperate with that. If you feel that specific color doesn't work for you, you can turn around and use a different. You can use Agrax Earthshade, or mix up your own wash that's a combination of chocolate brown and the territorial beige. Now I've got this paint left over here. I'm going to take a little bit more of the light tone and mix it in, because we're doing this in stages to lighten it up. Again, wipe out your brush, and you're going to do the same thing over, but you're going to do it lighter this time, because we don't want everything to be the same tone. This is to hit to hit the high spots. And I've found with faces, if you start from the chin and work your way up, you get a better highlight as opposed to working your way down, because they end up looking like somebody trying to tell a story around the campfire. And then for the final dry brush, I'm going to take the original color and hit it all again. Now I didn't wipe my brush out enough there, so I got a little bit of a streak there, but as you can see, his skin is actually starting to look pretty good. And it's the same basic process for all of these. Different skin tones require different basically different color palettes to make them look realistic. And for now, it looks kind of messy because we've got paint on everything else. But if you take a look at just his skin here, can you see that? I don't know if you can. But you can see that it's starting to work out pretty well. Now we're going to clean our brushes real quick. Now, with our tan young lady, we're aiming for the same color that we started with. So we're going to mix in a little chocolate brown using the exact same process that we did the last time. Put a little bit in a cup. We're going to take our dry brush, make sure that it's, since it just cleaned it out, you want to make sure it's really dry, because otherwise it will transfer way too much paint. Scoop some of my original color here. Scoop a little bit of the dark. Mix them together. I got some on the fuller of the brush, so I'm going to wipe that off real quick. Wipe that out, and we're going to do the exact same process. This way we hit the high spots, and it will highlight and show musculature. Now, in my previous tutorials, I stated that miniatures pretty much paint themselves because the sculptures, especially with Reaper, have done such an amazing job for us already. And this is kind of what I'm talking about, because all we're doing is using our dry brush and a series of colors to bring out the details that are already there. So then we mix one more. I need a little bit more of my territorial beige. Mix another step there, and you can honestly do as many steps as you'd like. The more steps you do, the more blended the colors look. I tend to favor a more stark look, and that's why here in a second I'm going to go back over and hit He-Man again with a slightly lighter color. But you do the same process a couple different times, and if you're not sure if your brush is dry enough, dip it a couple times and wipe it out before you do your dry brush. That way you can be sure. And you just hit this lightly with that. And remember, this is just to get the high points on the figure. And then the last color I'm going to do is the original color, which is the territorial beige. I might mix just a teeny itty bitty bit of that sand in there, give us a little more contrast. Wipe it out. Then hit it very lightly. And we have a very dark California style tan on our blacksmith. I personally, I'm thinking about making her a little lighter, but for this tutorial, I'll go ahead and leave it like this so you can get an idea, and we'll have full resolution photos either at the end of the video or more likely on the web page. Now, He-Man here, he looks good, but he's looking a little jaundiced, so I'm going to take a drop of ivory, and that's what that color looks like, and about half a drop of white. I think you can see it's this cup. I think you can see the ratio there. I'm gonna mix those up because I want to give his skin a little bit of a higher tone. And if you remember Prince Adam of Eternia, he was white, and to balance that yellow out, add a little bit of that tan. Oh, sorry, territorial beige, and we got a lighter color than we started with that will allow us to give him some good highlights on his skin. Drop that, nope. And we'll dry brush that on there. Now, the technique I'm teaching you on this dry brush is what, at least I refer to them in the classes I teach as brushing up. Basically, you're going from dark to light through the project. There are times when this is basically what I encourage everybody to do, is brush up. There are times when you can brush down, and that's if you want something glowing from within. And when working with pure white, I'll have a tutorial on working with pure white here in probably a couple months, because I've got other things to teach you. But if you try to brush up with white, typically white ends up looking very grainy, so you have to use other techniques for it. It's mainly because of the contrast of the color itself. And if you take a look here, my Prince Adam of Eternia is very, very, very pale, and I like it. Now, for our African American gentleman, before I came back and during the drying stage, I went ahead and did another layer of Nolan oil. Normally for black skin, I would go and mix up a black wash as opposed to using Nolan oil, but I'm trying to do these quick and dirty so you can learn. It's the same basic technique, but it has to be a lot more subtle. So what we're going to do, since we started with a chocolate brown, we actually have to go higher in the contrast on that, but we're going to start directly with our chocolate brown, which I've still got in this cup over here. I'll wipe that out a little bit. And you can do this all with one dry brush. I have like 10 of them, but as you do this skin, it's going to take a little bit longer to get your effect, because it has to be kind of subtle for it to look right. So your first dry brush is going to be chocolate brown, and it looks like this guy skipped leg day, honestly. Never skip leg day. Gives you chicken legs when you're a miniature. You do your chocolate brown on there, and honestly, it's subtle enough that it looks good, but for the eye on the table, I don't know if you can see that. Once again, we'll have better resolution photos when we get the website up. For it to look decent, you actually have to do a little bit more contrast, and what I recommend, honestly, is a chocolate brown, a teeny bit of red, and then my brain just hiccuped, and then finish it out with a territorial beige in your mix. So when I say a teeny bit, I'm going to take and just dip that brush, and I'm using Mephiston red for this. Mix that into your chocolate brown, and in this case, like I say, see how much that did? I'm actually going to have to add some more chocolate brown because we have to tone out that color quite a bit. So I'm going to take that down into a separate cup, because otherwise he's going to look like a demon. And I'll get to demon skin later, demon and orc skin, and believe it or not, that's about the right amount of chocolate brown in there. And then take a little bit of our territorial beige, mix that in to lighten it out just a little bit. And I know that's a disgusting color, but when we finish out this dry brushing, you'll see why I chose that set of colors. Clean the brush before we do this. Now, when I post post the high-res photos, I want you to keep in mind that we are in the process of painting these. These are the demo models that we're going to do for this entire beginner series. So you're going to get to see them go from this state to completed. But for right now, they look kind of crappy. And then when you dry brush that little bit on there, and I am absolutely certain that there are colors in the major paint lines that will do exactly what I just did here. But I honestly prefer mixing my own. And that is how you do skin. I don't know if you can see that, but I showed you the techniques here, and I've got Prince Adam, I've got Miss Thing and Mr. Thing here, and yeah, Prince Adam's got some pretty well-defined eyes, and before I move on, I'm actually gonna hit him with another layer of ivory and sand, because I'm not really liking how his skin's going. But before I even do that, I'm going to hit him with an Agrax Earthshade to darken out the yellow. I thought the yellow was going to look good. I don't like how it looks. So we're going to even brown lowlights on that. And the beautiful thing about doing this is all that shading we did will actually help define it when you come back. So I've got all this varying color here, and when I come back over them with a single dry brush, that varying color is going to help that pop quite a bit. And I'll show you the finished product on that. I'm not going to go back and do all this again for you, but when I do it, it's going to be that that desert sand and the ivory mixed together to get the effect. Here at the end, I'll show you where we're at with these steps, and then we'll move on to our next one, which is going to be blocking out specific colors and specific, well, basically how to work on the outfits. You're going to get to see how to do leather, how to do metallics, and I'm not talking non-metal metallics. I'm talking about just straight up metallics, and how to do wood, especially on the blacksmith. And then we'll finish it out with a tutorial on how to do hair. See you next time.